is an old teaching that says, the path is not something you walk to, it is something you walk on. And maybe that sounds simple, even obvious, but sit with it for a moment. Because most of us, when we hear the word path, imagine it waiting somewhere else, somewhere we have not yet arrived. We think we will find it once we have fixed the things that need fixing, once the day has been properly put away, once the mind has finally, mercifully, stopped moving. But the path is here. It is this moment. It is the breath that is already moving in you, without effort, without your permission. It is the weight of your body settling into the bed beneath you right now. You do not have to find your way to the path. You are already on it. If you have been lying here for a while, or if tonight is the kind of night where the mind does not want to settle, you are welcome here. You do not have to come to this with anything prepared. You do not need to know anything about old teachings or old teachers. You only need to be here, which you already are. Take a slow breath if that feels good. Let the shoulders soften just a little, if they are willing. Nothing is required of you tonight except this small willingness to be still. There is a very old way of understanding what it means to live well and to move through each day with some measure of ease. It speaks of a path with 8 parts, not 8 rules, not 8 things you must accomplish, but 8 qualities of attention, 8 ways of being, 8 little lights that, when you tend to them, seem to carry you forward rather than asking you to push. Tonight we will walk this path together, gently. We will move through each of its qualities as they settle into sleep, not to master them, not to improve yourself, but simply to let them do what they have always done, which is to ease a troubled mind toward rest. Each one is a kind of homecoming. Each one is a door you have already passed through many times without knowing its name. We will go slowly. There is no destination here, only the path itself carrying you home. Settle in a little more. Feel where the bed holds you. Let the sounds of wherever you are, the quiet, the soft noise of the world at rest, simply be there, neither too close nor too far. If it feels right, you might notice where you are listening from tonight, the room, the hour, the small particular dark that is yours. And then gently, let that go too, nothing to hold on to. We will begin. The first quality of the path is sometimes called right view. And when you first hear that, it can sound like a test. Like there is a wrong view and you might be holding it, but that is not what it means. It does not mean correct opinion or accurate judgment. It means something softer than that, something more like seeing clearly without adding. You know how the mind, especially at night, tends to add. A small thing happened during the day, a word that came out wrong, a task left undone, a look from someone you care about. And the mind takes that small thing and builds around it. It adds consequences. It adds history. It adds all the other times something like that happened, and all the times it might happen again. The small thing disappears under what the mind has built on top of it. Our right view is not about fixing that. It is simply about noticing it. Just noticing when you have added something that was not there. Let us explore a story about this. Long ago, in a village near the edge of a wide, flat valley, there lived a woman who had worked her whole life as a weaver. She was skilled and she loved her work, and most days she moved through her loom with a kind of quiet pleasure. But there were also days when the threads would knot, or the pattern would slip, or she would find at the end of a long row that something had gone wrong 3 rows back, and the whole thing would need to come undone. On those days, the trouble was not only the knot. The trouble was that she would sit with the knot and think, this always happens. And then, I'm not as good as I think I am. And then, by the end of the afternoon, I am not the weaver I pretended to be. The knot was real. The rest she had added. She had an old friend, a man who had spent many years in a monastery in the hills before returning to the valley to live an ordinary life. He would sometimes come to sit near her loom and watch her work. One afternoon, when she found herself unraveling an entire morning's weaving, she looked up at him and said, with a tired voice, "It has happened again." He asked her what had happened. "A knot," she said. "A mistake in the pattern. An afternoon of good work, undone." He watched her for a moment. He said, "Is that all?" She knew what he meant, because she knew him well. She looked down at the loom and at the pile of loose thread in her lap, and she breathed. She said, "There is also the story I tell about it." He nodded quietly, and he said, "The thread is real. The story is a guest." She untangled the thread that afternoon, and she did not untangle the story. She simply let it be a guest, present perhaps, sitting at the edge of the room, but not the one holding the work. That is something like what right view means at its softest. Not that you must stop the stories the mind tells, only that you might begin to notice them as something added, threads placed over the original thread. The original thing is almost always smaller and simpler and far more manageable than what the mind builds around it. Let us explore another story. There was a young man who lived near the sea and worked mending nets for the fishing boats. It was quiet work, repetitive and somewhat solitary, and he did not always love it. One evening, a boat returned to the harbour with a torn net so large and so tangled that the other menders refused it, saying it would take days and the pay was not worth it. The young man took it anyway, perhaps out of stubbornness, perhaps out of something else. He sat with the net all evening. At first, he saw only the whole of it, an enormous, impossible tangle, vast in every direction. He felt the familiar weight of it. This is too much. This will never be fixed. Why did I take this? Then something shifted. Perhaps it was simply tiredness. He stopped seeing the whole net and started seeing only the thread in his hands. Just this thread, just this knot. Not the 100 knots behind it, not the 50 still to come. Just the one that was here, between his fingers, at this moment. He worked like that for several hours, and when he finally looked up, a large portion of the net lay flat and repaired beside him. He had not fixed everything, but he had fixed what was in his hands. He told someone about it once, an old fisherman who had seen many things. The fisherman said, "You learned what every net mender eventually learns. The net is only ever one knot at a time. This is right view, very simply. The whole tangle of your life, your worries, your history, your unfinished things, is real. You're not asked to pretend it is not." You're only invited to notice that tonight, right now, there is only one thread in your hands, this breath, this moment, this dark room and this bed and this small, manageable, very simple now. Tonight, if there is something the mind is holding, a worry, a replayed moment, a knot, you might very gently ask, what is actually here and what have I added? You do not have to answer. Simply asking it softly is often enough. Let the breath move. Let the body be heavy where it lies. Let the eyes close a little more if they have not already. Feel the place where the back of your head rests, the particular weight of it, the small, solemn, solid fact of it. Nothing needs to be done with that weight. It is only here to remind you that you are here, fully, completely, solidly here. And that is, in this moment, the only thing that is true and the only thing that is needed. The second quality is sometimes called right intention. And again, the word right can feel demanding. But think of it this way. Intention is simply what you are leaning toward, not what you are achieving, not what you have accomplished, only the quiet direction of your heart. And the teaching here is that we often do not notice our own intentions until after the fact. We act, and then we look back and see what we were reaching for. We speak, and then we feel whether the words came from fear or from something kinder. We lie awake, and somewhere beneath the lying awake is a wish to feel safe, to feel that things are all right, to rest. That wish is a very pure thing. It is perhaps the oldest thing, the wish to find ease. Right intention is not about being a better person. It is about touching, very lightly, the wishes that are already moving through you and meeting them with a little gentleness rather than argument. There is a story sometimes told about this. In an old harbour town, there was a fisherman who was known for going out further than the others. Not because he was braver, but because he could not seem to stop. Each morning, he would tell himself, today, just a little closer to shore. And each morning, before he knew it, the town was a thin line on the horizon. He would return in the evening wondering how it had happened again. One season, a very old woman came to live near the harbour. She had no particular trade that anyone could see. She would sit at the edge of the dock in the mornings and watch the boats go out. After several weeks, the fisherman approached her because he had heard that she was wise and because he was tired of his own repetition. He said, I cannot seem to do what I intend to do. Every morning I intend to stay close to shore, and every morning I end up far out at sea. She looked at him and asked, what is it you want when you go far out? He said, the fish are bigger there. And she asked, and what do you want the big fish for? He thought for a moment. He said, to sell well at the market, so my family is comfortable. She asked, and what do you want for your family? He was quiet. He said, I want them to be safe. She nodded slowly. She said, and do you feel safe out there beyond the horizon? He opened his mouth and then closed it. He sat down beside her. He said, after a long while, no, not at all. She said, perhaps the intention to keep them safe has been hiding a fear about keeping yourself safe. Perhaps when you find that, the boat will come a little closer to shore on its own. He did not understand her fully that day, but he held it, and in the weeks that followed, he noticed that when he felt the pull to sail further, there was something beneath it, something he had not been looking at. And sometimes, just the looking was enough to let the boat drift back toward home. There is a second small story that travels alongside this one. In a village deep in a forest, there was an old woman who made candles. She had made them her whole life. She made them with great care, slowly, attentively, testing the wick before the wax was set, smelling the finished candles to be sure they were right. Her candles were known in every town for a day's walk in any direction. A young apprentice came to learn from her. After some weeks, the apprentice asked her, "Why do you make candles? You could do something that paid better, something less solitary." The old woman thought about this for a long time. She said, "I make them because I like to give people light." The apprentice said, "But you never see them burning. You make them and they go away." Oh, the old woman nodded. She said, "That is exactly right. I make them and then I let them go. And somewhere out there in a room I will never see, someone sits by a light that I made. That is enough. That is more than enough." The apprentice asked, "How did you find that?" The old woman said, "I had to go very far beneath what I thought I wanted until I found the thing underneath. The thing underneath was always simple, always small, always something like, I want to be useful. I want the world to be a little warmer than it would be without me. Right intention tonight is simply that. Beneath all the wanting and the worrying and the planning, there is something very small and very clear. A wish to be safe, a wish to be at ease, a wish to rest. That wish is already right. You only need to find it. Or something soft happens when we stop arguing with what we are. Feel it if you like. A small release somewhere in the chest, or the belly, or just in the room around you. There is nothing to argue with tonight. No position to defend. The breath comes. The breath goes. You are here. That is enough. The third quality is called right speech. And tonight, the most important speech is the kind no one hears but you. The way you speak to yourself in the privacy of your own mind at the end of a long day. And for many of us, that inner speech is harsher than anything we would say aloud to a person we love. You lie down and the mind begins its report, and the report is often unkind. You should have done more. You should have done it differently. That thing you said. Why did you say that? That thing you didn't say. Why didn't you say it? At a quiet catalogue of every small failure, every almost, every not quite. You would not speak that way to someone who came to you tired and asking to rest. Right speech at night means something very plain. Speaking to yourself the way you would speak to someone you care for. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a young apprentice in a small monastery in the mountains. She was diligent and serious, and she wanted very much to learn well. But at night, when the other monks were sleeping, she would lie awake reviewing the day's mistakes. A meditation session where her mind had wandered, a chore done slowly, a question she had not understood when the teacher asked. Each small thing she turned over and over, examining it for what it meant about her. After many months, she went to the oldest monk in the monastery. I was a woman who had spent most of her long life in silence and who now spent her days gardening. The young apprentice said, "I cannot sleep. Every night I review the day, and I find that I have not done well." The old monk looked up from her work. She asked, "Do you do this reviewing aloud?" "No," said the apprentice, "only in my mind." The old monk said, "Speak one of the criticisms aloud to me now, in the exact words you use when you speak it to yourself." The apprentice hesitated. Then she said, "I sat down during the long walk today when I was not supposed to. I am weak, and I am not serious, and I do not deserve to be here." The old monk was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "If a young student came to me and told me she had sat down during the long walk because her legs were tired, would I say that to her?" The apprentice looked at the ground. "Oh no," she said. "You would say she was human." The old monk nodded and went back to her garden. She said without looking up, "Perhaps the garden of the mind needs tending with the same hands you use here." The apprentice returned to her room that night, and she could not stop all of the reviewing, but she began to hear it differently. She began to notice when the words were cruel in a way she would never be cruel to another. And slowly, over time, the nighttime speech became something else, less a trial and more a gentle inventory, less a judge and more a quiet friend sitting beside her in the dark. Let us explore another story. In a quiet river town, there was an old man who spent his evenings sitting by the river and talking to himself, and not in the way of someone who has lost his bearing. He was sharp and clear, and everyone who knew him knew this. He had simply discovered many years before that when he spoke his troubles aloud in a kind voice, they changed shape. A young woman who lived nearby would sometimes pass him on her evening walks. One night she stopped and asked, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm talking to myself." She said, "What do you say?" He said, "I say what happened today, and then I say what I might say to a friend if they told me the same thing had happened to them." She asked, "Why does that help?" He thought for a moment. He said, "Because when I imagine saying it to a friend, I hear how harsh I have been, and then something in me softens, and the thing I was carrying becomes lighter. Not gone, lighter." She went home that evening and tried it. Oh, it felt strange at first, almost foolish. But she said aloud, in the quiet of her kitchen, "Today I forgot something important, and it caused trouble for someone I care about." And then she said, as if to a friend, "That was a hard mistake to make. You feel terrible about it. That makes sense. You're a person who cares, and sometimes caring people make mistakes anyway." She sat with that for a moment. The thing had not changed, but she had changed how she was holding it. You are not broken because the mind is unkind to you sometimes. That is one of the oldest human habits there is. But you have a small choice each time you notice it. You can listen as if the mind is right about you, or you can meet it the way you would meet a tired friend who has said something too harsh about themselves. Tonight, if the mind says something hard about you, ought I see if you can meet it with the words you would offer someone you love. That is enough. You did enough today. You are enough, exactly as you are. Let those words settle somewhere in the body, wherever they land. Rest here a moment. There is no hurry. Let the rib cage rise and fall of its own accord, without your management. Notice, if you like, the sounds in the room, or the quiet that is not quite silence, the soft presence of the night. You are not alone in the dark. The whole world is sleeping or resting or moving through its own quiet hours. You are part of that. One person among many who is lying still right now, asking nothing more of the night than to be held. The fourth quality of the path is called right action, and we will let this rest here in the bed with us, rather than lifting it out into the day. Our right action is not a long list of things you must do. At its heart, it is something much simpler. It is the recognition that your actions, the small ones, the quiet ones, the ones no one sees, tend to follow naturally from your intentions and your attention. When you are seeing clearly, when you know what you are leaning toward, when you speak to yourself with a little kindness, the right action tends to arise almost on its own. But tonight, right action is something even simpler. It is the act of stopping. So many of us lie down and immediately begin planning tomorrow's actions. The mind draws up its list. It rehearses conversations, corrects decisions, prepares for arguments that may never come. It is trying to act, even here, even now, even in the one place and the one time when action is neither possible nor needed. Right action, and tonight, is this: letting the body lie still. That is all. That is the whole of it. There is an old story that points to this. In a village beside a slow river, there was a man who was known as a gardener. Though he was no younger than 60 and his hands shook slightly in the mornings, his garden was the most beautiful in the village, not because it was the largest or the most elaborate, but because it had a quality of ease that other gardens lacked. Things grew there as if they wanted to, as if the garden itself were at rest. A younger woman who lived nearby tended her own small patch of earth with great effort and very little peace. She watered at precise times. She measured the soil. She moved plants when they did not seem to be thriving, and then moved them again when the new place also seemed wrong. Her garden was alive, but it was anxious. She came to the old gardener one afternoon and asked him what she was missing. He looked at her garden and was quiet for a long time. He said, "You're working very hard." She said, "Yes, I do everything I am supposed to do." He said, "And then what?" She said, "And then I watch to see if it is working." He nodded slowly. He said, "The watching after, does it help the garden?" She thought about it honestly. She said, "I suppose not. The garden grows or it doesn't, whether I am watching." He said, "The work is real and it matters. But there is a moment, after the good action has been taken, when the most important thing is to put down the work and simply trust the ground. The seed is in the dark soil. The water has been given. There is nothing more to do but let the night do what the night does." She stood there for a moment, feeling something settle in her chest. She went home and watered her garden, and then she did something she had not done in a long time. She went inside. She did not watch. She let the night do what the night does. There is a second story that sits beside this one, in a different key. There was a young man who worked as a builder of walls, dry stone walls, the kind that are stacked without mortar and held by gravity and balance and the careful choosing of each stone. It was slow, demanding work that required a great deal of thinking in the hands. He was good at it, but he struggled at the end of each day to put down what he was building. He would lie in bed and continue building in his mind, checking the wall he had done, planning the wall he would do tomorrow, choosing the stones in his imagination, testing their weight. He could not stop building, even when the work was over. One evening, an older man who had built walls for many decades came and sat with him outside. He watched the young man's hands, which were restless even in stillness, moving in the small familiar motions of placing stone on stone. The old man said, "The hands are still at the wall." The young man looked down and was surprised to find it was true. He said, "I cannot stop planning the work." The old man said, "Every evening, when I finish, I do one thing before I walk away from the wall. I look at what I built today, and I say, that is today's wall. It is complete. Whether it is beautiful or not, whether it is what I hoped or not, it is today's wall, and it is done." The young man asked, "And that is enough?" The old man said, "It is more than enough. Today's wall does not need tomorrow's hands. It will stand or it won't, and you cannot change it now. You can only rest and come fresh to the next stone. The day's wall is built. The day's actions, all of them, the good and the less good, the finished and the unfinished, have been placed. They are today's wall. They are complete in the only way they can be complete tonight, which is, they are done. Tomorrow there will be new stones. Tonight, the hands can rest. Let the body be a little heavier, the back resting, the legs resting. No wall to build tonight. The ground holds everything. Something settles when you stop asking the body to do anything at all. Notice the weight of you right now, the particular, specific, substantial weight of a human being lying completely still. You are not small. You are not weightless. You are here, or fully and entirely, held without effort by the earth beneath you. Nowhere to go, nothing to build, simply this. The fifth quality is called right livelihood, and it has another name that lives inside it: nourishment. What feeds you and what does not. We all know, somewhere in the body, the difference between a day that left us richer than we started and a day that left us a little more hollow. The meetings that took without returning. The tasks that asked for everything and gave back nothing. The conversations that felt like a leak you couldn't find. Only the slow diminishing of something you couldn't name. Right livelihood, in the quiet sense, is a slow noticing of where your aliveness goes. Not an urgent inventory, not a demand that you change everything tonight. Only the beginning of a gentle attention to what fills you and what takes without returning. There is a story sometimes told about this. In a small town, there was a baker who had worked her whole life making bread. She rose before the sun and worked until the middle of the day, and in the afternoons she rested. This had been her rhythm for so long that she had stopped noticing it as a rhythm at all. It was simply her life. One year, her daughter came to visit from the city and watched her mother work for a week. On the last evening, the daughter said, "I wonder if you are tired of it. All these years of the same loaves, the same early rising." The baker looked at her daughter with something like surprise. She said, "Tired of it?" The daughter said, It seems like very hard work for very little." The baker was quiet. Then she said, "Come with me tomorrow morning." The daughter came before dawn, and she stood in the small hot room and watched her mother work. And what she saw surprised her. Her mother moved through the work the way some people move through music, not thinking, not efforting, simply present in a way that had no name. The daughter had seen her mother many times and had not seen this. After the bread was in the oven, the baker sat down and had a cup of tea. She said, without any drama, "I do not work to have enough bread to sell. I work because this is where I find myself. When the bread is rising, I am not elsewhere. There is no other place I need to be." The daughter went home to the city carrying something she could not quite name. Not a decision, not a plan. Something more like a question. Where was the thing in her own days that made her not elsewhere? Let us explore another story about this. There was an old teacher who had retired from the school where he had worked for many years. His students expected him to travel or to rest or to pursue some long-deferred pleasure. Instead, he began each morning by walking to the edge of his village and tending a small bridge that crossed the stream there. The bridge had been repaired many times over the years, but it was always in need of some small attention. A plank that had loosened, moss that had grown over a foothold, a railing that had worked free. People would pass him in the mornings, and sometimes they would say, "You worked hard your whole life. You could rest." He would say, "This is rest." They did not always understand him. One morning, a former student stopped and asked him to explain. He said, "When I was teaching, there were days when the hours were long and the work was heavy, and I came home tired to the bone. But there were also days when I watched something take hold in a young person, some light in the understanding, and I walked home so full of something that I could not name it. Not pride, something more like rightness, like I had been exactly where I needed to be." The student nodded. He said, "This bridge gives me that same feeling in a smaller key. It is not important, but someone will cross it today, and their feet will be dry, and they will not know why. That small, invisible usefulness, that is what fills me. I have spent my life learning what fills me. This is not work. This is knowing what I am. Right livelihood, tonight, is not a question you need to answer. It is only an invitation to carry with you, in the days ahead, and a gentle noticing. Where do you feel yourself filled rather than emptied? What are the small moments of quiet rightness in your days? Those are not accidents. Those are the path, showing you something. Tonight you have done what you could. Let the body rest in that. Tomorrow the noticing can continue, gently, at its own pace. You might feel, right now, a gentle softening in the muscles. Not sleep, not yet, but something that is leaning toward it. The body knows the direction. It has always known. Let it lead for a while. Let the thinking mind be a passenger tonight, watching the road go by rather than gripping the wheel. The road knows where it is going. The sixth quality is right effort, and this one is perhaps the one most of us need most to hear, because most of us believe, somewhere quietly but firmly, that trying harder is always the answer, that if something is not working, more effort will fix it, more pushing, more will. more determination. And for many kinds of things in the world, this is true enough. But for certain things, for peace, for sleep, for the settling of a restless mind, more effort makes things worse. You cannot force yourself to sleep. You probably know this already from the nights when you have tried. The harder you aim at sleep, the further away it seems. It retreats like an animal that knows it is being chased. Right effort means finding the middle way between too much and too little. Not forcing, not giving up, not gripping, not letting everything slide. Something in between. A quality of gentle attention that is awake enough to be present and loose enough to let things be. There is an old story about this. Out in the mountains, there was a young student who had come to learn the art of the bow from a master archer. The master was an old man with slow movements and eyes that seemed to see further than the eye can usually see. For the first weeks, the student practiced every day with great effort. He pulled the bowstring back with all his strength, held it as long as he could, and released with a kind of desperate energy. His arrows flew hard and fast, but they rarely went where he intended. He went to the master, frustrated. He said, "I am trying as hard as I can." The master looked at the bow in the student's hands. He said, "I can see that." He took the bow from the student and drew it back, slowly, to a point that seemed not quite full, perhaps halfway, perhaps a little more. He held it with a stillness that looked like nothing at all. He released. The arrow went to the very center of the mark. The student stared. He said, "But you barely tried." The master handed the bow back. He said, "I tried exactly as much as was needed, no more, no less. This is the art inside the art, not the bow, not the arrow, the meeting between force and ease." The student spent years learning that meeting place. It was different every day. Some days it was a little more effort, some days a little less. But the seeking of the middle, never gripping, never abandoning, that was always the same. Let us explore another story about this finding of the middle. There was a young woman who learned to play an instrument from an older musician in a town near the coast. The older musician was known for having a sound that was unlike any other. Warm where others were bright, or unhurried where others were quick, with a quality of ease that listeners described simply as beautiful without being able to say why. The young woman asked her one afternoon, "How do you play like that?" The older musician said, "When I was your age, I practiced until my fingers hurt. I thought the pain was progress. Then one day, an even older teacher heard me play and said, 'You are fighting the instrument.' I did not know what that meant." She said, "The instrument wants to make sound. It is built to make sound. Your job is not to force the sound out. Your job is to show up and let the instrument do what it does, with just enough guidance from you to direct it." The young woman asked, "And how much is just enough?" The older musician laughed softly. She said, "That is exactly the question. And the answer changes every day. Some days, just enough is barely anything. Other days, it is more than you think. But the asking of the question, how much do I actually need here? Not how much can I give? That changed everything for me. Just enough. Not too much, not too little. This is right effort. Tonight, perhaps you have been trying too hard to sleep. pulling the bowstring back with everything you have. Let it come to the middle. Let the effort soften until it is barely effort at all. Just a quiet willingness, just the smallest bow held gently, just the lightest release. You do not have to make sleep happen. You only have to stop making it not happen. Let the breath be that arrow, loose, easy, going where it goes. A breath and then another. The room is quiet. The body is still. You have not done anything wrong tonight by being awake. You have not failed at anything. Sleep is not a test. Rest is not a performance. You are simply here, in the middle place, holding just enough and no more. The seventh quality is called right mindfulness, and it has become a word that is everywhere now, which means it has also become a word that has lost a little of what it originally held. So let us find it again, here, in its simplest form. Mindfulness is not a technique. It is not a thing you do. It is simply a quality of noticing. The noticing that is aware of what is here, right now, without leaping ahead to what is next or falling back into what was. And the reason it is called right is because there is also a mindfulness that causes suffering. A mind that is too sharply present with pain becomes overwhelmed. A mind that watches itself too closely becomes anxious about its own watching. Right mindfulness is softer than that. It is the kind of noticing that is more like a lake's surface than a spotlight. Wide, still, reflecting without clutching. There is a story sometimes told about this. In a valley between two mountain ranges, there was a woman who had lived alone for many years after losing her husband. She was not unhappy exactly, but she was often distracted, always anticipating the next task while doing the present one, always finishing conversations while still in the middle of them. Her friends noticed, though they said nothing. She moved through her days as if she were always arriving from somewhere else. One spring, she fell ill for a few weeks and was forced to rest. She could do nothing but lie in her small house and watch the light move across the wall. This was not a thing she had ever done or thought to do. She found it, at first, almost unbearable. The mind had nothing to reach toward. But as the days passed, something began to happen. She noticed the way the light was different at each hour of the morning. She noticed the sound of rain against the window. She noticed one afternoon that there was a small bird nesting in the overhang of the roof, and that it returned regularly in a pattern that was somehow deeply satisfying. When she recovered and returned to her ordinary life, something had shifted. Not dramatically. She was the same person, doing the same things. But she found herself here and there, pausing, actually seeing the things she was looking at, and actually hearing the voices she was listening to. There were moments, small, ordinary moments, that had a quality she had not known was available in ordinary moments. She told her oldest friend about it once, trying to find words for something that resisted them. She said, "It was as if I had been living in a house for years and had never opened the windows." Her friend asked, "What changed?" She thought for a moment. She said, "I stopped being so far ahead of myself. Let us explore another story about this quality of being here." There was a man who worked as a keeper of a small lighthouse on a rocky coast. He had the job for many years, and it was a solitary one. The The light needed tending, but it did not need constant attention. So there were long stretches of the night when there was simply nothing to do but be present in the tower. And in the early years of his work, he had hated these stretches. He would fill them with worry about his family, about whether he had made the right choices, about what other people thought of him. The emptiness of the night felt like a demand that he could not meet. But one winter, a storm kept him in the tower for 4 days. He had books but no lamp to read by, food but little appetite. He had only the sound of the sea and the rotation of the light and the long hours of the dark. By the 3rd day, something had changed. He had run out of the worrying material. He had thought through every fear until it was threadbare. And what remained after all of that was simply the sound of the sea, the light making its steady circle, the dark, and then the pale beginning of dawn. He came home from that storm different, not calmer exactly, but more present in a way he had not been before. When he ate his meal, he tasted it. When he spoke to his children, he heard them. His wife noticed. She said, "You came back lighter." He thought about that. He said, "I think I left some things in the tower, things I had been carrying that were not really mine." Right mindfulness tonight is simply that, not being far ahead of yourself, not lying here already in tomorrow, not replaying something that has already passed. Only here, this room, this dark, this breath, this body, this quiet. It is available to you right now, not as a practice to master, as a simple opening of the window. What is here? The weight of the blanket, the sound of the quiet, the in-breath, and then the out-breath, the small, real, sufficient fact of being here. The breath comes without your asking. Yeah, it has been doing that your whole life. Through every hard night, every easy one, through sleep and waking and all the hours in between. It has never stopped. It will not stop tonight. There is something trustworthy in that, if you let yourself feel it. Something that says, the body knows. The body has always known. And the 8th quality, the last of the 8, is called right concentration. And right concentration, at its heart, means something very specific. The gathering of the scattered mind toward one single, simple, restful thing. Think about the mind on a difficult night. It is everywhere at once. Past and future and maybe and if and should have and will they and what if. 100 small fires, each one demanding attention, each one pulling the eye toward it before the eye has finished with the last one. A right concentration is not the suppression of all that. It is the gentle gathering, like a shepherd at the end of the day, walking slowly through a wide field, calling softly, letting the scattered flock drift toward one place, not chasing, not herding harshly, just calling steadily, quietly, until the field grows still. What do you gather toward? The breath, the body, a single simple image, the sound of the dark, the weight of you here, in this bed, in this room, held safely by the ground. Let us explore a story. There was an old monk who lived at the edge of a forest. Students would come to him with all manner of questions about how to quiet the mind. He answered most questions briefly, because he had noticed that long answers tend to give the restless mind more to chew on. One young student came to him on a night when the student had been sitting for many hours without success. The mind had scattered in every direction and refused to settle. The student was frustrated, nearly in tears. He found the old monk sitting outside by a small lamp, watching the trees. He said, "My mind will not be still. I have tried everything." The old monk looked at him with great gentleness. He said, "Come sit here." The student sat. They sat together in silence for a while. Then the old monk pointed toward the lamp. He said, "Look at the flame." The student looked. The flame was very small. It moved slightly in the night air, but steadily. They sat. The student looked at the flame. Nothing happened. The mind was still busy, still generating its weather. But there was also the flame. After a long time, the student noticed something. The flame was still there, and the thoughts were still there. And somehow, the flame had quietly become more vivid than the thoughts. Not because the thoughts had stopped, but because the steady, small, warm light had given the eye a home. The old monk said, after a while, "The mind scatters because it has nothing to return to. Give it somewhere to come home to. A fire, a breath, a single sound. Then when it wanders, and it will wander, it simply comes home. No struggle, no disappointment, just home again." The student went back to his room, and for the first time in many weeks, he slept. Let us explore one more small story about this quality of returning. There was a woman who had raised several children and who, by the time they were grown and living their own lives, found herself unexpectedly unmoored. The house was quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar. The days had a looseness she did not know how to fill. She had been a mother so completely that she had forgotten, somewhere along the way, how to simply be a person sitting in a room. One evening, a neighbor came by who was very old and who had outlived 2 husbands and many friends, and who nonetheless had a quality of settled aliveness that everyone who met her noticed. They sat together in the kitchen. The woman said, "I don't know how to be still anymore. Every time I sit down, the mind sends me somewhere else. I can't seem to stay." The old neighbor poured tea for them both. She held her cup in both hands and was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Where do you go?" The woman said, "Everywhere. Backward, mostly, and forward into worry." The old neighbor nodded. She said, "When that happens to me, I hold the cup, just this cup. I feel the warmth of it in my hands, and I say, very quietly, just to myself, 'Here, I am here. That is all. That is all.'" The woman thought this sounded very small, but she tried it that evening after her neighbor had gone. She made herself a cup of tea, and she sat down with it, and she felt the warmth, and she said very quietly, "Here, I am here." And something happened that she had not expected. The room became a little more real. The sounds outside became a little more distinct. The familiar things on the shelf across the room, the jar, the small worn book, the clay figure her daughter had made years ago, seemed to come closer, as if she had been away for a long time and had just now come home to them. She had not solved anything. The looseness was still there, but she was in the room, and the room was enough. "Here, I am here. That is right concentration at its most practical. A small flame, a warm cup, the body in the bed. One simple thing to come home to, again and again, as many times as needed. Not a technique to master, a door that is always open when the mind goes somewhere. And it will go somewhere. Come back. The breath, the body, the weight, the dark. Here. We have walked a long way together tonight. 8 parts of a path, each one a small door into the same room. The room of ease, the room that is always already here, waiting for you to stop walking past it. There is one more story, and then we will let the words go. Think of all the people sitting with this tonight, in their own dark rooms, in their own quiet hours, carrying their own variations of the same things you carry. The worry about a person they love, the replay of a hard moment, the wish for more ease, the wish simply to rest. This is not your particular failing. It is the human condition, as old as sleep itself, as old as the first person who ever lay down and found that the mind did not immediately follow. And yet people have found rest. People have found it through all of the long history of this being difficult, not by fixing the mind, but by finding the path beneath it. That path is here now. There was a grandmother who lived at the edge of a small village and who was known for her stillness, not the stillness of someone who has nothing inside them, but the stillness of someone who has found, over a long life, where to put their attention. A grandchild once asked her, "How do you not worry? You seem so quiet." She said, "I worry sometimes, and I simply notice where my feet are." The grandchild did not understand. She said, "Your feet?" The grandmother nodded. She said, "When the mind goes far away, I notice where my feet are. If I am sitting, I feel the floor. If I am lying down, I feel the bed." Just the small, real, warm fact of where the body is. And when I am there, in that small fact, the worry can be somewhere nearby without carrying me away with it. The grandchild thought about this for a long time and then said, "That is very simple." The grandmother smiled. She said, "Most of the things that matter are. Right concentration is not the achievement of a perfectly quiet mind. It is the having of a place to come home to. And in sleep, that place is simply the body, the breath, the small, soft fact of this moment, this dark, this rest. Here, when the mind goes somewhere, and it will go somewhere, come back. The breath, the body, the weight, the dark, home. We have walked a long way together tonight. 8 parts of a path, each one a small door into the same room. The room of ease, the room that is always already here, waiting for you to stop walking past it. There is a story I want to tell you now, before we let the words fall away for good. It is the story of no one in particular, and everyone. There was once a woman who lived in a village that sat between a forest and a wide meadow. She was an ordinary woman. She cooked, she tended her garden, she helped her neighbors when they needed it. She had no particular title or practice or discipline that she could name, but people in the village noticed something about her. At the end of each day, yet when others were tense or tired or carrying their hours like a sack of stones, she seemed to put the day down when she crossed her threshold. Not because her day had been easy, Not because she had no worries. There were seasons in her life that were hard, losses she did not recover from quickly, years when the ground refused to be generous, evenings when she came home from work that had come to nothing. But even then, she crossed the threshold. She would come home, and she would pause at the door. She would feel the handle in her hand. She would notice the light in the kitchen, the warmth of the room, the small sounds of the evening. And there was a moment, just a moment, when she let the outside world be outside. Then she would cross the threshold. Her daughter once asked her how she did it, and she said, "How do you leave the day behind like that?" The woman thought about it. She said, "I don't leave it behind. I just stop carrying it in front of me. It still comes in, but it settles after a while, the way mud settles in a still jar of water." The daughter asked, "But what do you do exactly when you stop at the door?" The woman said, "I feel the handle. I notice the light. I say to myself, without words, 'I am home.'" The daughter said, "That is very simple." Her mother said, "Most of the things that work are," she had learned, without knowing its name, something very like right view. She saw what was actually there, the thread, and not the story she built around it. And right intention. She had found the wish beneath the wish, the simple desire to be home and safe, sure and right speech. She had learned to speak to herself at the end of each day the way she would speak to a tired friend. And right action. She had learned to plant the day's seeds and trust the ground. And right livelihood. She knew what filled her, and she tended those things carefully, the way you tend a small flame. And right effort. She had found the middle place, neither gripping her days nor abandoning them, simply holding them lightly. And right mindfulness. She had learned to notice where her feet were, to be in the room she was in, to hear the sounds that were actually there. And right concentration. She had a place to come home to, a threshold, a moment of arrival that she returned to each day like returning to a flame in the dark. She had not studied any of this. She had found it in the long, patient living of an ordinary life. You have this too. Perhaps you have had it longer than you know. Perhaps tonight is simply a night of remembering it. The path has been under your feet all along. It was never somewhere you needed to get to. It was only ever here, in the weight of the body, the sound of the breath, the quiet room. We have walked through many rooms and listened to many voices tonight. A weaver and a knotted thread who learned to see the story as a guest. A young man mending nets, one knot at a time. A fisherman who kept sailing beyond the horizon, looking for safety in the very thing that made him unsafe. A candle maker who gave light to rooms she would never see. A young apprentice reviewing herself in the dark until she learned to be a kinder witness. And a man by the river who spoke kindly to himself until the thing he was carrying became lighter. A gardener who trusted the ground, and a wall builder who learned to put down his stones. A baker whose bread was a homecoming. A retired teacher who found the same filling thing in a small bridge over a stream. A lighthouse keeper who left his worries in the tower. A student and a flame that gave the wandering eye somewhere to return. A woman who found the home in her cup of tea. A grandmother who always knew where her feet were. An ordinary woman at a threshold, learning to arrive. You do not have to remember any of it. It has already settled in you, the way things settle in still water, the way the silt in a river finds the bottom when the current slows, without being told, without effort, simply because stillness allows it. You did not have to do anything with these stories. You only had to be here, which you were. Tonight, there is nothing more to solve. No question that needs an answer before morning. No action that must be taken before the sun comes up. The path has no more steps to walk tonight. It has walked you gently all the way here, to this bed, this body, this breath, this dark. Let the day be somewhere outside, settling on its own. Let tomorrow be where tomorrow is, which is not here, which is not now. The only thing that is here is this: the weight of you in the bed, the rise of the chest and the fall, the room, the quiet, the small sounds that tell you the world is still going about its business without needing anything from you. You are not broken. You have never been broken. You are a person who is tired and who is resting. And that is one of the oldest and most ordinary and most beautiful things there is. Let the eyes be soft. Let the jaw be soft. Let the hands unclench if they have been clenching. Let the belly be soft. Let the mind be like that still jar of water. Let whatever is in it simply settle, slowly and without help, the way it will if you stop stirring it. There is a threshold you are crossing now. Not a door in a house, but the one inside you. The one between the day and the night, between the held and the released, between the person who carries and the person who is carried. You have reached it. You do not have to do anything at the threshold except let yourself cross it. The path has carried you home. The door is open. The lamp is lit. There is nowhere else to be tonight. Perhaps you can feel somewhere in the body a small settling, and a loosening of something that has been held without your knowing. That is the path working, not in great dramatic ways, but in the quiet way that deep things work, like water finding its level, like a room growing still after everyone has left, like the first few stars appearing before you notice it is fully dark. You do not have to understand any of it. You do not have to be grateful for it, or aware of it, or able to name it in the morning. It has already happened. The seeds are in the ground. The water has been given. The wall is built for today. The path does not ask you to carry it. That was the thing we began with, all the way back at the start of this long night. And it is still true now, here at the end. The path carries you. It has been carrying you this whole time. Through every story, through every pause, through every breath that came and went without your asking it to. And you stayed. Through all of it, the restless parts and the settling parts, you stayed. That is not a small thing. That is everything. Let the breath come and let it go. Let the next breath come and let it go, the way it has done 10,000 times tonight, without your help, without your permission, without your needing to ask. Feel how little effort that takes. Feel how the body manages it all on its own, in the dark, without instruction. You have been breathing your whole life without once having to remember to do it. That same effortless knowing lives in everything the body does when you let it, including sleep, including rest, including the deep, complete releasing of a night well spent. Let the body be heavy now and soft, and the mind be soft, and the night hold you the way the night has always held you, quietly, completely, without asking anything in return. Sleep well.